Don Waddell promised a new look Blue Jackets this season, but how different does this team actually look? We're looking at the forward group on today's Locked on Blue Jackets.
You're Locked on Blue Jackets, your daily podcast on the Columbus Blue Jackets, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked on Blue Jackets, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. I am, as always, your host, Jeff Foster, here to give you the good, the bad, and the ugly about your favorite team and mine, the Columbus Blue Jackets. Before we get started, I want to thank everyone for making this your first listen of the day every single day. Locked on Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms and over on YouTube. I also left you know that this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Just visit FanDuel.com/locked on to get started. So, like I said, kind of in yesterday's episode, like I said at the beginning of this episode, we're going to spend the rest of this week kind of looking at what the Blue Jackets looked like last year versus what do they look like this year, or what are they potentially going to look like? Because when Don Waddell got the job, he said, listen, there's probably going to be half a dozen new faces on this roster in October. And he's not far off, depending on, who does and who doesn't make it. There's, I think, between 4 and 6 guys as full-time NHLers this season that were not full-time Blue Jackets last season, potentially more than that. So I wanted to kind of run through what the top 12 forward looked like last year. To do this, I looked at who had the most average time on ice per game, and then had to add Laine in manually because he was taken off of last year's stats for some reason on BlueJackets.com. But so I've got the 12 forwards organized by time on ice average last year, and then we're going to look at what I'm expecting, or who I'm expecting to see in kind of the top 12 for the Blue Jackets at the end of the upcoming season. Obviously, we can't predict injuries, knock on wood, or deadline trades or anything like that. But the forward group doesn't look super different on paper, but there's some things I want to talk about which I think are going to make them look like a much improved group, despite the fact that there's really only 1, maybe 2 new faces, maybe 3, depending again on injuries, on who stands out at training camp, things like that. And this is only forwards. Tomorrow we're going to look at the defense. The day after that, we're going to look at goaltending. And then hopefully we'll be able to sit down and say, right, the Blue Jackets are better this year than they were last year, or vice versa, or are they the same, or whatever. But let's kind of start off with talking a little bit about the top 12 forwards last year. So again, for this, I took the top 12 time on ice guys that played more than 15 games. So James Malatesta doesn't count. He only played 11. Trey Fix-Wolansky only played 11. Gavin Brindley played 1. Luca Del Bobbelou's played 1. So none of those guys who, despite being above some of these players in time on ice average, I did not add into this because they did not play the required amount of games for my arbitrary benchmark. So time on ice leaders for the forwards for the Blue Jackets, shocking absolutely no one. Boone Jenner, Johnny Gaudreau, Kirill Marchenko were the top 3. After that, we've got Sillinger, Fantilli, Chinikov, Justin Danforth, Sean Corrali, Kent Johnson, Dmitry Voronkov, Mathieu Olivier, and then Patrick Laine slotting in somewhere in the bottom there. Obviously, he didn't play a ton for the Blue Jackets last season due to injury, due to being in the program. I think he played, 18 games, all things considered. So I don't necessarily think that his time on ice average is the most accurate. And also he was injured for most of the year. So, it is what it is. But in terms of guys that are returning, everyone on that list is still a Blue Jacket except for Patrick Laine. He has been quote unquote replaced by Sean Monahan. That's the kind of the in and out of it all. And then basically I've penciled in everybody else is likely to be returning. I think there's an argument that could be made for Gavin Brindley to have a strong camp, to basically get stapled to Fantilli's wing and, go from there. It's Fantilli's line mate to lose, really, So I kind of swapped him and Danforth But beyond that, like Jenner's going to be in the lineup, Gaudreau's going to be in the lineup, Marchenko, Sillinger, Fantilli, Chinikov, Crowley, Johnson, Voronkov, Olivier, they're all going to be in the lineup if all goes well. I think I'll be interested. And again, it's tough to kind of look at because I don't know what the new coach is going to do. Dean Everson is a very specific type of coach. I wouldn't be surprised if he is advocating for sending guys like Brindley down to the Monsters to, get more ice time there rather than sit on the bench in Columbus, which was a big problem that they had last season. We don't need to go into the myriad of ways that the coaching was not ideal for the Blue Jackets last season. But on the surface of things, it looks like, for the most part, it's going to be the same cast of characters back, minus Laine, who wasn't really there last season, adding Monahan, but I think that it's going to look very different. I think it's look very different for a couple of things. First of all, basically everyone on this list missed some time due to injury. I don't think a single Blue Jacket played all 82 games this season. I think one Blue Jacket did, and I want to say, I feel like it was Ivan Provorov. Yeah, so Johnny Gaudreau played 81, Marchenko 78, Sillinger 77, Voronkov 75, Danforth 71, Crowley 62, Jenner 58. Obviously, he missed time due to the broken jaw, due to the personal reasons at the end of the season. Mathieu Olivier was in and out of the lineup. He had 54. Chinikov injured, 53. Fantilli injured, 49. Johnson injured and sent down to the minors, 42. And then, we get into kind of the Mikhail Puchers, the Fix-Wolanskis, the Malatestas, etc., etc. So basically, I would consider missing fewer than 10 games to be a healthy season. So that's only Gaudreau, Marchenko, Sillinger, and Voronkov are the only Blue Jackets forwards that played more than 72 games this season. So if you can get, a 75 to 80 game season out of players like Jenner, out of players like Monahan, out of players like Fantilli, it's going to look very, very different. Chinikov hopefully will be healthy again. Kent Johnson, I'm looking for him to be a full-time Blue Jacket this season, not to be in and out of the lineup, healthy, scratched, injured, sent down to the Monsters, whatever. So while it looks the same on paper, minus the Monahan for Laine swap, I think it's going to look like a very different forward group. I think a lot of that is going to be, again, players are healthy. The young players are a year older. I'm looking at guys like Sillinger, Fantilli, Johnson to all have big seasons. I think Voronkov needs to take a step forward. I think Marchenko is going to keep taking steps forward. I think Chinikov needs to take a step forward. I think the young guys are going to be better. And hopefully they will be surrounded by the older players in a way that is more conducive to sustainable play, development, and frankly, winning games, because I like Boone Jenner. I do. I think he's great. I'm not sitting here saying that Boone Jenner is a terrible player and they should get rid of him. In no way should he be leading this team in time on ice. He shouldn't. It is frustrating for many, many reasons, but in terms of who should be leading the team in ice time in the forward squad, like, in theory, it should be, Gaudreau and Monahan should be up there. If they want Monahan to be that 1C, if they want him to be, playing 22 minutes a night, then he should be. But it's going to be really interesting to see how the ice time gets kind of parceled out, especially if they want to do, a Monahan, Fantilli 1B, 1C, 1A, 1B situation, which we'll kind of talk about in a little bit here, kind of how the lines are going to look, how the ice time is going to look, and we'll break down kind of strengths by individual forward position as well. So that's coming up in just a second here on Locked On Blue Jackets. First, you've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel. It's America's #1 sportsbook for a reason. Well, we've got something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then, with a YouTube TV base plan, you're going to be able to watch every single regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel any time. So, if you're in Ohio and you love to watch the New Orleans Saints or the Miami Dolphins, then why not get in on this deal with FanDuel? Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sportsbook. Once again, that is FanDuel.com/lockedon. Welcome back to Locked On Blue Jackets. We're talking about the forward group today. With the Cole Sillinger contract signing, that's all of the forward players have been kind of locked in for the most part. There's still, some moving to do. Who's going to, push for a spot in camp and make some decisions difficult? Who's going to maybe not have the camp that they wanted? Who's going to, it's all kind of up in the air in terms of where everyone is playing. But for my money, like the top 13 forwards for me, anyway, should be Jenner, Gaudreau, Marchenko, Sillinger, Fantilli, Chidakov, Danforth, Corrali, Johnson, Voronkov, Olivier, Gavin Brindley, Sean Monahan. And then there is potential for, I wouldn't be surprised if a guy like Malatesta comes in and really pushes for a spot in camp. I don't know that his ceiling is it really going to be anything above kind of, maybe third line. But if he can kind of cement a role on the fourth line, he's got that Sean Corrali, Mathieu Olivier type game of just kind of a little bit of a pain in the butt. And I mean that, affectionately, but I would be surprised to see him come in and again make a push for camp. I thought he had a really solid rookie season with Cleveland this year. So again, looking to take steps forward, interested to see what he does. Does Caden Lindstrom come in and have a really great camp and make them make a tough decision about whether to send him back to Medicine Hat? I think it's highly unlikely that he gets more, like he might get his 9 games in the NHL to start the season and then they send him back. I think it's a highly unlikely. And, feel free to save this to pull receipts later on. But I genuinely, there is no way that, Lindstrom is a full-time NHL player this year. I just don't think he is. He's going to be real good soon. He's not NHL ready quite yet, in my opinion. So, if we've figured out who our 13 NHLers are, let's, for the sake of argument, Malatesta gets sent back to the Monsters. What do we do in terms of lineup? I know Boone Jenner led the team in ice time because he was playing that 1C role. In my mind, Boone Jenner is a third-line winger on this team. So, and again, we can debate until the counts come home about whether Monahan should be the 1C or not, but that's probably where he's slotting in, if only because they want him to play with Gaudreau. So, like, my guess is, in terms of lines, I've got Gaudreau and Monahan kind of as a duo on that top line, and then I'm going to put Marchenko there as well. Second line, in my opinion, should be Johnson, Fantilli, Brindley. For a variety of reasons, but I think Fantilli needs to get those reps in. I think Brindley is, the chemistry is undeniable. I think if you staple those two guys together, they do what they did in college. Like, you're laughing all the way to the playoffs. Again, not this year, but soon. And Kent Johnson is a top 6 player. He's not a third or fourth line player. He doesn't play that kind of game. I think if you put him on the third line in favor of putting someone like Jenner on the second line, then you are wasting his potential. He's not going to develop into the player that you want him to be. And that's kind of a waste of a 5th overall pick, in my opinion. Like, you got him to be this incredible game-breaking skilled forward, which he is. So why is he playing on the third line, which is, it shouldn't be a checking line. I think that hockey should have 3 skilled lines, maybe 4 skilled lines. I don't want to go too crazy here, but what if we got away with it? What if we just did away with the checking line and had 4 skilled lines? Anyway, that's not what this episode is about. But Johnson should be getting second line minutes. He should be getting offensive zone time. And he should be playing with guys that he could ostensibly play with for the next 10 to 15 years. Johnson, Fantilli, Brindley sounds really fun. We'll see if it works out, but I think they'd be silly not to at least try it in preseason, in training camp, etc. So there's your top 6. If Brindley does not make the team, if he gets sent down to the Monsters, or if they make him the 13th forward for some reason, which I don't think they should do that at all, maybe then you put Jenner up on that second line and do Johnson, Fantilli, Jenner. Maybe you do Johnson, Fantilli, Chinikov. Like, there's some options here. I don't think that I love the idea of Johnson, Fantilli, Chinikov necessarily, but that could be, again, could be fun. We don't know until we try it. Like, and Laine leaving has really opened up a lot of possibilities because he was basically locked into that second line wing spot. I think they'd be silly to play him with Gaudreau. Demonstrably zero chemistry between the two of them, which is just wild because it seems like they should have been made in a lab for each other. But it gives other guys a chance to step up, and it does, like, if they move Johnson to the third line for a game or a couple of games, like, it's not the end of the world. Like, he's making $1.8 million. If you've got a $9 million forward on the third line, like, you've got some problems that are deeper than what's happening there, So, recap, Gaudreau, Monahan, Marchenko, line 1. Fantilli, Brindley, Johnson, line 2. I like the idea of having Jenner, Sillinger, and Voronkov. And Chinikov on the third line. I think, again, that seems fun to me. I think Jenner he can go back to the wing and he can do what he does best, which is play that kind of crash and bang style hockey that he's really good at and that he hasn't really had a chance to play because he's been playing top line center minutes instead of middle 6 winger minutes. So Sillinger, third line center, feels like a no-brainer. He's going to continue to develop. He's going to continue to become a really strong third line center that could potentially become a second line center if things, depending on how things wind up. And then I like Chinikov a lot. Again, he's not a fourth line player. Arguably, he's not a third line player, but got a hell of a shot. And I think he really came into his own this season. And I'm excited to see what he does. I think putting him with someone like Sillinger, who has turned into a pretty solid two-way player. I think Jenner is pretty good at creating offense. Chinikov just needs to finish it, Sillinger starts it, Jenner continues it, Chinikov finishes it, boom, 20, 30 goals for Chinikov this season. Probably more likely 20. I don't think he'll hit. I wouldn't be surprised if he hit 30, but I think it's unlikely playing on the third line. Which leaves our fourth line of Kuraly, Voronkov, Olivier. I'm fine with that. Again, it's your fourth line. They should be playing, 14 minutes a night max. I know it feels annoying to have Voronkov on the fourth line, but I think you put him with the Bash brothers in Kuraly and Olivier, and that's just a really unpleasant line to play against. Like, Voronkov is enormous. Mathieu Olivier's got no fear in him, and Sean Kuraly is capable of throwing his weight around as well. That is a line that you should throw out to tire out the other team. Get them to ice the puck, get them to do something stupid, and then that's when you throw your top 6 out there and let them take advantage of a tired team on the other side. So that's kind of what I'm looking at in terms of movement. Again, it's kind of tough to paste one directly over the other, but again, just going back to if we look at ice time leaders, Jenner, Gaudreau, Marchenko was the top line in terms of average ice time. We've moved Jenner down to the third line, and then Monahan, who wasn't here, but I should really look up what his average time on ice was last season. But we can slot him in there, and then last season, the second trio for ice time, Sillinger, Fantilli, Chinikov. That's 2 third liners, and then Fantilli should be a first liner, but it's probably going to be a second liner. Again, 1B, 1A, 1B situation potentially. Third collection of ice time, Danforth, Corelli, Kent Johnson. Last season, Kent Johnson should move up, Corelli should move down. Danforth, I think, is probably the 13th forward. That's nothing against Danforth. I like him as a player a lot. I just think that the Blue Jackets have a lot of his type of player and a lot of his type of player that do it better than he does. He's a really great, 13th forward. He can jump in, he can play, up and down the lineup. He can miss a beat and immediately get back in, So he's a really great option for 13th forward, in my opinion. And then Voronkov, Olivier, and then Laine on the bottom there. That's, again, there's the 2 fourth liners. Add Corrali. It's all, I think the Blue Jackets are better at forward this year, depending on what they do with their forwards. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. And I also want to talk about what this team is missing, what this lineup is missing. And we'll do that in just a second here on Locked On Blue Jackets. First, I've got to tell you about eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience is the formula for winning championships. It's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance with things like superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you are into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. They've got over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, so you're always going to find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every single time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. Welcome back to Locked On Blue Jackets. We're talking about the forwards. And we've kind of looked at what the forward group is going to look like next season, what the line combinations could be, who should be leading this team in ice time on average. Spoiler, it should not be Boone Jenner, like Boone Jenner as I do. But what is this team missing? And this is where kind of there's a little bit of irony in this, I guess. I don't think it's quite irony, but this team is missing a truly elite goal scoring winger. Marchenko is close. I think I really like Marchenko. I think he's going to have a big year. I think he's going to really pop off this year. But having someone in the room like Patrick Laine and having it go so wrong and having him never really hit his potential, like the Blue Jackets could really use a guy like Patrick Laine at his full potential, because that's a 30 goal scorer right there. The Blue Jackets haven't had a 30 goal scorer, I want to say, since Cam Atkinson did it in 2018, 2019. I think that was the last time the Blue Jackets had a 30 goal scorer. So it's been a minute, let's say. They didn't have one this year. They didn't have one last year. So we're already, last year the leader was 26. Before the year before that, the leader was 28 in Oliver Bjorkstrand, who had 28 goals in 80 games before the trade. In 2020, 21, a weird year because they only played 56 games. Oliver Bjorkstrand led the team as well, 18 goals. 2019, 2020, the leader in goals was Oliver Bjorkstrand again with 21. Again, a weird season that got cut short pretty soon. So yeah, in 2018-19, Cam Atkinson had 41 goals in 80 games, and that was the last time the Blue Jackets had a 30 goal scorer, never mind a 40 goal scorer. And I don't think they had one the year before that either. The year before that, Artemi Panarin led the way with 27. So the Blue Jackets haven't had a 30 goal scorer in 5 seasons? I already forgot how the math worked. In one of the last 6 seasons, they've had a 30 goal scorer. They could really have used a guy like Patrick Laine, who, if he was going to score 30 goals, and if wishes were horses, blah 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 blah, you can't sit here and say, man, if only Patrick Laine had hit his potential, because he didn't, and it sucks and it's unfortunate. But like, if the Blue Jackets had one more goal scoring winger, like it could be such a different team. And there was a lot of talk about, and I had a comment on YouTube about this actually, which was, if you guys really wanted a goal scoring winger, there was one available and you didn't draft him at 4th overall. And I'm like, yes, okay, but more like the center depth was more important than the goal scoring winger that may or may not be in the NHL in 2 years. Regardless of what Demidov is doing, like the center depth was more important then. I would have loved Demidov on this team. I would have been super happy with that, but I'm not sitting here upset that they drafted Lindstrom over Demidov, But that's what they really, really need, is elite goal-scoring winger. Do they have one in the pipeline? Maybe. Maybe not. But that's where I would be putting my focus kind of going forward. Now that, again, knock on wood, because the last time I said this, everything fell apart spectacularly. You have something approaching center depth for the first time in like a decade. Now build around that. So overall, I'm pretty happy with how the roster looks right now. Obviously, caveat that if things go wrong and they've got Kent Johnson playing 8 minutes a night on the 4th line, then, me and DNFS are going to have words. But I think this forward group is solid. I think it's fine. I think it's missing a couple of pieces. I think it's going to be, and some of these pieces will be like the players that are here in 2 years' time, I wouldn't be surprised if Karamarchenko is a 30 to 40 goal scorer in 2 years' time. I wouldn't be surprised if Chinikov is a 30 goal scorer in 2 years' time, Wouldn't be surprised if Fantilli becomes that elite one center literally in October. So, lots of movement, lots of development. That's the thing with a young team, is that sometimes the pieces that you need are the pieces that you have, but 2 years away, So overall, I feel pretty happy with the forward group. This, I think, is this is kind of the median one in terms of, so the defense has changed the most. Goaltending hasn't changed, but could change a little bit more than people are expecting, and I'll talk about that on Thursday's episode when we talk about the goaltending. But forward group, couple of new faces, potentially Brindley, Monahan, couple of missing faces in Laine, potentially Danforth, but I feel pretty happy with how this is going to look, and I feel pretty happy going into October with this forward group. I know that there's a lot of talk about, well, they've got all that cap space. What are they going to do with it? I don't think they're going to go out and get another forward. They might, but I don't think they will. So that's kind of all I've got for today. Tomorrow, we are going to talk about the defense because that is much changed. Is it better? Is it worse? Who can say? We'll talk about that on tomorrow's episode. Thank you for listening to this episode, for making us your first listen of the day every single day. Locked On Blue Jackets continues to be free and available on all podcast platforms, on YouTube and on SiriusXM. I've been Jay Foster. You can find me on Twitter at _Jacob Foster, JAKOBFORSTER. You can find the show at LO_Blue Jackets. If you have comments, questions, criticisms, you can email me at lockedonbluejackets@gmail.com. And until tomorrow, make sure you stay locked on.